Hey, welcome back to another episode of Middle Eschatology, giving an apology against the full preterist hermeneutic. And this is Stephen Witz, your host for today. And as we can see, we are going to be dealing with the rapture today. But first, this musical interlude. Okay, now you might ask me why do I add music like that? Because I think it's just good and maybe sets the tone for some things, but that is the W's with the devil is bad. And that is for the lost, confused, unclear, perplexed, disordered, bewildered, full preterists for them to chew on. Good song. Today we're going to be dealing with the rapture, of course, and we're going to be looking at it. And so here's kind of the context of what I want to do. I am going to go to 1 Thessalonians 4 and deal with it right there from the text itself, show you the parallels of how this comes up and why it's a legitimate doctrine. And then more than likely, I might end up having to go to part 2 if I want to keep this a little bit shorter, to go to William Bell and his idea of refuting the doctrine. So he goes to First Thessalonians and he tries to refute the future's position based on Old Testament texts and some things. And I think there's some absolutely funny things that we got to look at in there that he does that you're going to find very, very, very funny. So with that, I've got it off. And what we're going to do then is switch over to... There we go. No double check something here. Yep, we're there. Okay, so the coming of the Lord. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse starting at 13. So we're going to go through this. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, ignorant, lacking that information about those who are asleep, fallen asleep. They are physically dead. These are not alive people. These are physically dead. And why do I say asleep? Well, I'm going to show you some things here. Let's go to, first of all, Daniel chapter 12, since this is a very famous one for full preterists to use to try to prove their point. Those who have fallen asleep. And, of course, we're looking at Daniel 12. Now, look. And many of those who what? Sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. Now, what does it mean, asleep? Of course, physically dead. Many of those who are physically dead in the dust of the earth. So what is physically dead? It's the body that's turned to what? The dust of the earth. They're in the graves, they're in the tombs. Do you need anything more than that? The idea that we're talking about a dead body? Let's go to Isaiah 26 and verse 19. Whoops. Oh, come on. There we go. 26:19. Whoops. I did it backwards, didn't I? Okay, we'll just go to 26. We're on 26. My fault. Thinking ahead of myself here a little bit. Okay, verse 19. Your dead shall live. Their bodies shall rise. So the dead is equated with what? The bodies. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is the dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. Not Hades giving birth to the dead, not talking about souls, but we're talking about the body shall rise. So what is the hope of Israel is that resurrection. So what kind of resurrection are we talking about? Well, your dead shall live. Their bodies shall rise. Now, is that what we saw? And that is the example in the New Testament? Yeah, well, let's look at something very closely. In the dust, in the grave, in the tomb, those are all similar language, correct? And in Matthew 27, here's something no preterist can deny exactly what the meaning of the words is. The tombs were opened, and many of the bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep, physically dead, see, there's that same terminology, were raised, and coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went to the holy city and appeared to many. So here's a literal example of what happened. Of course, with Lazarus, it's also the same type of thing. But the tombs were open in many of the bodies. So when we're talking about tombs being open, we're talking about the physical bodies. So those who are asleep in the dust is the bodies. One other place that we can look real quick that I want to show you that I know William Bell will deal with and talk about, but we're doing it here first. There's some similarities, and I went through the whole thing last night and did an episode and blew it, made a problem with the volume, and so I had to redo it this morning. But here we are. He has given him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. Do not marvel at this, for an hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear the voice. What's in the tombs is the dead body. So those that are in the tombs and come out. And come out. Those who've done good to the resurrection of life, those who've done evil to the resurrection and judgment. See, it's the same thing as Daniel 12. The bodies that have turned to dust, they will hear his voice and come out of the tombs. Not come out of Hades, but those that are in the tombs. What comes out of the tomb? The dead body, because that's what's been put into the dead body. So it is the soul that comes out of Hades, enters that body, and then that dead body comes walking out, as the example is. So that establishes that it's dead bodies that we're talking about that are being raised. Now, how does this work? Those who are asleep, that you might not grieve as others who do not have hope. So why is the resurrection of the body of those who are asleep the hope? And of course, because we're talking about the redemption of the body. We're talking about being transformed from a lowly body to his glorious body, to be like his glorious body. So that is the hope. And it is for in this hope that we are saved. Philippians 3, remember? For in this hope. What hope? The adoption of sons, the redemption of the body. What is the body being redeemed from? The grave, death, its fallen state. It's being redeemed from all of that. It's being raised, made wonderful and new. So let's go on and we'll talk about that in a minute. So through God will bring with him, even so, since we believe that Jesus died, he rose again. See, he keeps doing this comparison between what Jesus did and what the saints will do. It's always a one-to-one correlation. And he's using Jesus as the example. He's the one who died and then rose again. Therefore, when we're talking about the resurrection of the saints, those who have fallen asleep in Christ, they will be raised in the same way. Do you need help with that? Is it the same way? Is it identical the same way as Jesus? Or is it just souls out of Hades and going into a brand new body? Well, let's start off with the idea that transmigration is what the cults teach. That like reincarnation and things, that you're getting a brand new body. It's not the same one being changed or anything else. It's just a brand new body. And of course, we as Christians do not believe that. We know that Christ being raised from the dead will never die again. So death no longer has dominion over him. That means he is mortal. For the death he died to sin once for all, but he lives to God. Where did it go? Why is it all of a sudden? Am I in a... I, all of a sudden, am going blank. I had to pause there for 1 second. My brain went brain dead here. Is verse 5, it was 6:5. For if we've been united with him in a death like his, physical death, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. How was he raised? Bodily resurrection. We will physically die, we will fall asleep, and then we will be raised in a resurrection just like his. So there's no doubt about that is what he's talking about. So even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep or physically died. So how is God bringing with him those who have physically died? Well, that implies two things. One, that the souls of those people who have physically died are in heaven. They're not in Hades. They're in heaven. And number two, God is bringing with them. All those souls are coming with him, with Jesus as he comes. Key fact. For why? For this is what we declare by the word of the Lord, and we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord. So we who are alive will not precede those who have fallen asleep, so those who are physically dead. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry and a command, and the voice of the archangel with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. So all those Christians who've fallen asleep, God will bring with them, and they will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught together to meet them in the clouds in the air. Okay, so the first thing we want to look at is for the Lord himself will descend from heaven. Now, after, of course, I'm doing this as apologetic, of course, to William Bell's, his little discourse and everything else. So he wants to argue for the Lord himself will descend from heaven. He wants to use that and say, see, it is God coming down like God did in the Old Testament. He comes down in the cloud. Moses and everybody goes up to meet him, but Moses got to go all the way up to the top and meet him at the very, very top because the Lord is not the one. And then the people are standing with their feet on the ground and he's still standing around. And there's no such thing as about meeting him in the air. But see, he never really deals with that. Together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, not on top of the mountain. And that's where Bell completely ignores. Now let's look at this. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven. Where else is this promised at? Where's the first time that we get to see this in the New Testament? And that would be in Acts 1. It says what? This Jesus, who was taken up from you into heaven, will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. So it is this Jesus. It is not chariots. It's not clouds. It's not angels. It's nothing else. It is this Jesus who will be taken into heaven. Now, is this prophesied in the Old Testament? Does it talk anywhere about Jesus himself physically appearing? Let's go to Zechariah 14. Let's get through there. Zechariah 14. There's something I want to check. Okay, yep. Okay, Zechariah 14. What does it say? On that day, his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem. Literal statement. Fight against those nations when he fights on a day of battle. Then the Lord will go out and fight. There's a battle that goes on. The exiles, the siege of Jerusalem, and all that. So on the day that he comes, he will stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem. He will stand on the Mount of Olives. That's what Acts 1 says, right? His feet shall stand. And he comes with his saints. Let's look at one other things. So this all points to the second coming. And we go to Revelation. And again, it talks about what? His coming. Now, here's something I want to point out. Well, let's go first. Then I saw heavens open, and behold, a white horse, one sitting in faithful and true. His eyes are like fire, his clothes robed and drip, and he comes out of heaven. So through the clouds. And then is he coming? Who's he coming with? And it says, and the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following on horses. Okay, so fine linen, white and pure. Who are these people? Let's go back up. For the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns. Let us rejoice in God, give him glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. It was granted her to clothe herself with fine linen, bright and pure. See, there's the thing. That's identifying. This is the same thing that we see, I believe, in Revelations 6. Let's go down and look at it real quick here. Come on. You can go down. 3, 4, 5. Which has not defiled their garments. Come on. Is that Revelation 7? Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where do they come? Who are those white robes? Now, this is, of course, recapitulation, in a sense, from 7 to 19, talking about the same thing. Okay, so what? Every nation, peoples, and tongues stand before the throne in white robes and palm branches in their hands. Why is that palm branches so important? Remember Palm Sunday, when they laid the branches down in their hands, they were allowing, they were escorting Christ into Jerusalem. And he said, clothed in white robes, from where do they come? They're the ones coming out of the great tomb. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Serve them day and night, and sit on the throne, hunger and heat and all that. So again, it is talking about the saints who come with them. Let me go back. 1 Thessalonians 3. What does it say about his coming? Father, at the coming of our Lord Jesus with all his saints. Now, where does this come from in the Old Testament? Again, let's go back. I meant back, not forward, huh? Zechariah 14 again. What does it say? This is all about the day of the second coming. Then the Lord my God will come, and the holy ones with him. Now, this is exactly what Paul was quoting in 1 Thessalonians 3:13. The Lord my God will come, and the holy ones with him. So it comes back to Zechariah 14. So this identifies these passages, and what it's talking about is the second coming. Now, just as a side note, on that day, let's look at something real quick. You had to talk about the siege of Jerusalem there first, and then he talks about on that day. Why isn't it not the same day? And I'll show you real quickly for you guys to study. It says, on that day, the same day, right? The Lord will give salvation to the tents of Judah first, and then the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem will not suppress that of Judah. Wait a minute. Did he give salvation to the tents of Judah in 70 AD? No. It says, on that day the Lord will protect the inhabitants of Jerusalem so that the feeblest among them they will be like David. The inhabitants of Jerusalem shall have strength to the Lord of hosts, their God. See, it's not describing the same day. It says on that day of his coming is not the same day as the siege. It's impossible for him to destroy Jerusalem, throw half the people into exile, kill them and all of that, and then say at the same breath that the Lord will protect and that the Lord's going to destroy all those. And then, well, I won't go that way. Okay, so, but there you've got the idea is that the inhabitants will have strength from the Lord, that he will come with all of his saints. The armies of heaven in Revelation is the armies, the saints. We showed you that. And so going back then to 1 Thessalonians, we who are left who are coming of the Lord will not precede those who have physically died, for the Lord himself would descend from heaven. We've proven that. With a cry of a command and with the voice of an archangel, with the trumpet of God, and then so those people who died, those things, people who have fallen asleep in Christ, will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left from what? Meaning those of us who are alive, who have lived out their lives, and we are left of the originals, we will be what? Caught up together with them. Now, of course, Paul is applying this to himself, but was he one of those we? No. So this is not to be prophetic, but it is generally speaking of that. So who are alive? The people that will be alive when he comes. So we know he did not come in AD 70. And you can sit there and say this is a prophecy. It applies to them. It could only happen to them. But you still have to prove, William Bell, that 70 AD was the second coming. And so far you have not ever done that and cannot do that. Because here's the other thing that you create a problem with. The dead in Christ, then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together to meet him in the clouds. So we who are alive, those who are dead, God brings the souls with them. The bodies rise from out of there, as that is what is resurrection. Bodies from turning to dust become life. Then the two of them go to meet the Lord in the air. Now, here's one of your severe problems that you cause. And let's go to 1 Corinthians 15 again. And pay close attention. Okay, tell you, brother, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, meaning this carnal, human, frail body that has to sleep and eat and pee and poop and all that kind of stuff will not inherit. We can't go into heaven with this body. Nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable, meaning we're going to grow old and die. And so if we're going to go to heaven in this body, it would be impossible because this body will do what? It will still grow old, it will still rot, it'll still die. So we can't go into heaven in this perishable, fallen flesh and blood. So here he is. He's telling a mystery that was not known before. I tell you, mister, we shall not all sleep. There it is again. Falling, the body going into the grave, physically dead. But we shall be changed. So we who are alive will be changed. In a moment, in twinkling of an eye, the last trump. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed. So the dead, okay, those two terms, perishable and mortal, always refer to the body. Perishable means, of course, that it can perish, that it grows old, gets rotten, dies. The same thing with mortal means subject to death. That body will end up obviously dying. I don't think you can find any place in Scripture where it uses the word mortal, and these terms perishable, body, to include and mean anything else but the body being mortal and imperishable. I'm talking about the two words together. That word mortal means subject to death. The body is always subject to death. Mortal is always talking about the body, never the spirit. Why? Because it said what? He brings with him the souls out of Hades, if you want to say that. But God brings with him those that were dead, that were physically dead. So that is the souls. And they what? They are raised first. He's bringing them with him. That's a description of a raising. If you want to argue they're out of Hades, well, there's your God will bring with him. There he is what? I'm in 1 Corinthians, but that was in 1 Thessalonians, of course. So, and then we shall be changed. We who are alive will be changed. How will we be changed? They were raised imperishable, so we have to be also, in order to be in heaven with this new body, this glorious body, because we are being changed from his body, our lowly body, to be like his glorious body. From mortal to immortal, that is what 53 is. For the perishable body must put on the imperishable, and the mortal body must put on the immortal. Now, the word body there, soma, is not included in the original Greek, but that is the subject. And that's why perishable is referring to the body. Let's look at that in the Greek interlinear real quick, and I'll show you what we're talking about. This type of a sentence, the verb to put on imperishability, that becomes a noun. See, if something is perishable, that would be a verb, or imperishable. But when he uses the term imperishable and he puts on immortality, nouns, these are talking about the body. It behooves for the perishes this to put on imperishable. So what is he talking about? This, perishable. He's talking about the body. That's in context with the whole verse there. So the body is changed. Now here's where cognitive dissonance slips in. and I'm going to say this very clearly. The dead are raised. We who are alive are changed. How are we changed? We are changed from perishable, growing older, to imperishable, no longer growing old and weak. We are changed from mortal, subject to death, to immortal, which means no longer subject to death. So, any Christian who was alive in 70 AD, if Christ came in 70 AD, then every one of those Christians would have been changed. It says it right there. We shall be changed. Well, we will be made immortal and imperishable. We're not talking about the soul because, for example, where in the idea did we get it after the body dies, the soul goes into Hades or the soul goes into heaven, whatever way you want to argue it right now. Where do we have an example of a soul dying, being subject to death? Even then, the second death is considered, the lake of fire. The soul is thrown into where it burns forever and ever. It still doesn't die there either. It burns forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, for all eternity. So there's no sense that the soul dies and can grow old. At the Mount of Transfiguration, it was Moses and Elijah. Both of them were bodily taken out, and says God buried Moses' body, and Elisha himself was taken up into heaven. He never had a body that was buried into the ground or anything. And here the two of them show up at the Mount of Transfiguration. Whether you want to call it body or not, there's the two souls of them. They have not perished. They have not died or anything else. Because think about it. If you die after you're dead, then you're saying that the soul is dead. It no longer exists, and we don't have any example where a soul ever ceases to exist. Now, God has the power to destroy the body and the soul, but it never says that the soul on its own is subject to a type of death where it ceases to exist. So, in 70 AD, if those people were there, God brought with them, those who were alive were changed, then they would have been changed. And unfortunately for them, we have no record of anybody becoming immortal. We have no Christian that lives after 70 AD that testified that they were changed, made immortal or imperishable. In fact, every example of Barnabas, Clement, those who the Bible talks about before 70 AD, and John living after 70 AD, and none of them have been made immortal. In fact, John himself dies about 96, 98, somewhere in there. AD, he dies. He's getting buried, so his body is doing it. So he was never changed to immortal. He remained subject to death, and death took his life there. So there was no victory over death. And of course, that's why the preterist has to change that to a spiritual death. But I'm sorry, that doesn't hold water. You might as well get a sieve and try to fill it up with water than try to get somebody to believe that it's not about physical death. So we who are alive are changed. The perishable body must put on the imperishable, and that. And what happens? Death is swallowed up in victory. Why? Oh, death, where's your victory? Oh, death, where's your sting? Why the victory? Because that person who's been made immortal will never die. Those who are alive will gain the victory over death and will never, ever die because they are changed and taken up. Now, let's go back to 1 Thessalonians 4 here for a second. For the Lord himself will descend. We who are alive, who are left, will be changed, according to 1 Corinthians, and will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Now let's look at that word meet. It is the Greek word ampantesis. William Bell will bring this up. And will be caught up in the clouds, Nephilius, apatisen, the meeting. So what does it mean to meet? And Bell's going to bring this out right, a meeting. The act of meeting, to meet up, a phrase seeming almost technical for the reception of a newly arrived official. Now, he almost quotes this, Bell, this definition. See, there's no other idea. It's only used 3 times, and every third time it's used, like Matthew 25:6, come out to meet him. Go you out to meet him. And that is talking about the marriage supper. Again, what happens? Let's look at that real fast. I want you to hear this. Let's use the parable on that. Come on, baby, we can do this. We can do this. There we are. At midnight, the voice cried, rang out, "Here's the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." So the bridegroom is coming. Remember Revelations 19? The marriage supper. The marriage supper is you have the party with the bride and all that. And then what happens? The bridegroom comes to where they are. And they go out of the house to meet him there. They come out to meet him. So they're coming out to meet him from out of the house. Same word, right? When the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry went out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps, and they came out to meet him. Before my brain goes fried, come out to meet him. Now, what he's going to try to argue in the video that comes up is that he's going to try to liken it to the events of Moses and the elders and all that when they met the Lord at Mount Zion and were meeting up with him. And we'll look at his discussion in a little bit, but probably in the next episode. But you're going to see all that. He's going to try to put that image in there. But we've looked at it specifically from Revelations 19. The bridegroom has come, all the Lord and all that, that happens. So where was the other meet? We want to look at that real quick. So meeting up with them. It's like when an elected official comes up, you meet up with this elected official. And he will say that. 28:15 to meet us. And when Paul, as they came to meet us, 28:15. Let's go to the parallel verses. Load this back one up. Okay. And the brothers there, where they heard about us, they came as far as the forum of FP and 3 times to meet us. On seeing them, Paul thanked God and took courage. Now, let's look at the context. So they came out to meet him. Now, where was Paul going? What was going on? Paul was bundled sticks from them when they waited long. Paul arrives at Rome. We set ship, putting in Syracuse. There we found brothers. We were invited to stay with them for 7 days. So we came to Rome. They heard about us. So we came to Rome. The brothers there, see, this is the rival of the official. And the brothers there, when they heard about us, came as far as the forum of Epistle and 3 times to meet us. So on seeing that Paul, God thanked him and everything else. So he was in Rome. They came to meet him there in Rome. So this meeting up. Now, where else do we see this kind of language in this scenario? Well, I'm going to go to the word, let's go back to the Greek. And remember, I showed you that meeting up is like an elected official who comes. Okay? Let's look at a specific word, parousia. And we've got to spell it right in order for this to work. What does parousia mean? A coming and rival event, especially of the second coming of Christ, right? Parousia is used in the East as a technical expression for the royal visit of a king or an emperor. The word literally means being beside, thus the personal presence of somebody who has come. The meeting up, the royal visit of somebody. Visit of a king or an official. See that? The president is probably coming, especially the rival of the owner who could deal with the situation. It's a technical term with reference to the visit of a king or some other official, a royal visit. Hence, in the New Testament, showing the advent of parousia of Christ. So that's how it's being used. So you go through every example and through there's somebody who comes. It's used 2 different ways. One is the presence of the person who actually comes, and the presence of coming, hence the coming of the rival of advent of Jesus. So the other type of presence is, and there's just your few verses where it's talked about parousia, where it's talking about not the second coming, but other things. And let's see, Philippians 2:12, for example. as in the presence of me. Therefore, beloved, just as always you have obeyed, not as in the presence of me only, but now which more in the absence of me. See, there's that idea, presence and absence. So when the word parousia there means that Paul was present, and so they obeyed him when he was present. He was there physically and bodily. But then when he was out and gone, not there, as in absence. But look at that word there, apousia. Parousia, apousia, absence. Presence. Do you see that? Present, absence. That's how the two words work together. Don't mean to blow your mind about there, but okay, where else did we see this type of meeting up then? The arrival of Christ. Now, Palm Sunday, I'm just going to tell you what, remember what happened, is that when Jesus was coming, he sent runners on ahead. No, I'm going to have to go to and show you something specifically. And so let me go back here a little bit. It's called Triumphant Entry. I doubt that it's just going to give me what I want. Can't even spell the word right. All of a sudden, I'm going blank in here. But it is in Mark, it is mentioned Mark, Matthew, that when Jesus came in, he sent the disciples ahead to get the colt. And as they were coming out, they put the blankets on the colt. The king, the royal visit of a king, who comes riding in a donkey into Jerusalem, and they spread the coats and everything else. This is the same imagery. What happened back in those days when the king returned, the leader of the armies and stuff, after they defeated something, this is what the Romans did, is they would take slaves and captives, put them at the front of their caravan. And so when they came close to Rome, coming home to their port city or whatever it might be, they would send runners ahead who would let everybody know. They would come pouring out of the city, and they would have like a parade into the city. Same thing as Palm Sunday. Word went ahead, people came out and escorted the king in. Titus. In fact, Rome, they put an archway that it stands to this day about the war of the Jews and how Titus defeated the Jews, and that war was won and commemorated by that stone. And it was the same thing. When he came home, he led the captives in front of him, and can't get away from that, folks. Now, where am I going next? Okay, I think I've covered everything that needs to be covered on those two basic issues, and I don't think I have to go back over again. So that is basically what the rapture is talking about. Jesus comes down, the saints meet him like the marriage supper of the Lamb. They meet with him, they become his army. They come down with him as his saints on the horses, dressed in fine linen, from Revelations 19. They're the army that comes with Jesus to fight against the beast and his army. And see, that's where another cognitive dissonance comes on, and they claim this is kind of a spiritual army that, not really the saints. And I don't think they've ever really touched it, honestly. But when 19 says that it is the beast and his armies that is defeated, if Nero and his armies were the beast in 70 AD, they were never defeated, and that never stopped. Another point of cognitive dissonance is that this first battle takes place in Megiddo, not at Jerusalem. It says when Jesus comes down with the saints, it gathers the armies of the nations to fight against him, the rider on the horse. Let's look at this again real fast. The Senate saints. So we know who's the armies of heaven, fine linen, are the saints. And then what? I saw the beasts and the kings of the earth with the armies gathered to make war against Jerusalem. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. To make war against him who is sitting on the horse and against his army. Not against the saints. Oh, wait, yeah, against the saints. Not against the Jews, not against Jerusalem, But it says, against who? Him who's sitting in the horse. Where does this army take place? Where does this battle take place? And again, that is the Valley of Megiddo, which is some 60, 70 miles away from Jerusalem. But the beast was captured, the false prophets were done, and signs and all of them. They were thrown, that received the mark. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. So the beast was captured and thrown in. Nero committed suicide in 68. Sorry, if Jesus came back, Nero wasn't alive in 70. He could not have been thrown in. If he was the beast, he could not have been thrown into the lake of fire. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire. I'm sorry, this is literal language. And can't prove it otherwise. There's nothing in the Greek or anything else that you can go to show that this is symbolic or something else. So these two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. And the beast and his army are the ones that are destroyed by Jesus and his coming. Oh, the final point is this. And I want to make this real clear as an introduction to... see, the whole argument made by Preston Bell and the others is that when Jesus comes, he comes like his father did in the Old Testament. So he's going to argue from Moses that when Jesus came down or God came down to the mountaintop and people had to go up, there was a meeting there, but that never included the air, even though coming out of the clouds out of heaven, they meet him in the air. The clouds are in the heavens, so that, forget that language, of course. They're going to try and tell you this is a meeting place like on a mountain or something like this, and he tries to translate to why God. But here's the whole problem. He was in the beginning with God, was made, and Word, and all that. 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Did God ever come down in the form of, in flesh, become flesh, and dwell among people? God the Father? No, never did that. So when Jesus comes, he's not coming like his Father. He's coming unlike his Father ever did. And he's coming in flesh. Now, here's the other thing in preparation of arguing against him. It is in Exodus 24. I want to show you something quite interesting. Now, remember, he's talking about the covenant of Moses and everything else. And he said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 others. Moses alone shall come near to the Lord, but the others shall not come near, and the people shall not come up with them. So, you're coming up to the mountaintop, very top. Moses came and told the people all the words, and Moses wrote everything down. And Moses took half the blood, came back down, and took the book of the covenant, read it, threw the blood on everybody. And then what happens next? Then Moses and Aaron, Nadab, and 70 others went up. And they saw the God of Israel. And there was under his feet, as it were, a pavement of sapphire stone, like the very heaven for clearness. And he did not lay his hand on the chief people of Israel. They beheld God. They looked at God. They saw this person standing there. And they ate and drank. He ate and drank. That's included in there. Because this is part of the covenant process of sharing a meal together to signify. Remember, the blood of the covenant was poured out with them in these other verses. So now they're sharing a meal between the two parties. They've got to break bread among each other. God cannot, you just can't say, you people eat and God doesn't. So here's Jesus. This is what we call a Christophany. Now, after this whole scene was over, what happens? The Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there. So he's to go up higher. So Moses rose with his sister Joshua. Moses went up the mountain of God, and he said, wait here for us until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. And whoever has a dispute, let him go to them. Then Moses went up to the mountain. The clouds covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelled in Mount Sinai. The cloud covered it for 6 days. And the seventh day called to Moses out of the mist. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mountain, the side of the people of Israel. So Moses entered the cloud and went up to the mount. And Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And while the rest of them went back down, and they're down there, they're watching this whole scene up there. So he's going to try to argue. See, this meeting with God didn't take place in the air. It wasn't where people came off the ground to meet him in some way. And it was only Moses that was allowed to actually go up there and meet in the presence of the Lord. So, and he's forgetting, of course, that This is Jesus who shows up here. It is Jesus who met with them, and he's also going to bring out, and he's going to talk about meeting with him. The idea of Ampantesis is that it's the royal visit of a king. He's coming. This elected official, whoever he might be, is coming to town. You go out and meet him as he is coming into town. That is the whole point of that word of Ampantesis, is of meeting with. So, with all that said, as a preliminary, what we're going to go next to do in the next video is look at all of everything that William Bell says. So, with that said, thank you guys for sticking around and listening, and please stick around for the next part. I'm going to do it right away, but it might not be posted a little bit later. We'll see what happens. But thank you guys, and for those who subscribe and everything, I appreciate it. And let me know if there's something that I need to touch on. Drop me a note, and you can find me, of course, in Full Preterism, All Things Fulfilled. A couple of those websites you can definitely find me in, and I do answer my channel when I get a chance, and sometimes a little bit sporadic, but I will be there. Don Pressman's got a new one out. The Olivet Discord, number 244, Futures and Their Potpourri of Definitions. And I'd love to, I might have to deal with that one next. Okay, guys, thanks for coming, and we'll see you on the backside.